Okay, so I'm just going to dive right in, y'all. I hope everybody's having a great DrupalCon. So far, it's almost over. And I'm excited about my session today. Today I'm going to be comparing two of the top site building tools in Drupal to help you decide which one you should use on your next project. I'm going to keep the chat window open for a little bit. It might be too distracting. I might shut it off eventually. But I do like to see how people are reacting to what I'm saying. Okay, so why are we talking about this? If you're like me, you've heard 100 times, somebody's coming to you to work on a project, and they're saying our website is just too inflexible. And so maybe they're coming from another platform. And so you're excited because you're a Drupal developer, and you're like, well, this is great. We're Drupal developers. Drupal is flexible. We have a module for everything. And so we can build this flexible system for you. And it sounds great. The challenge is that there's just so many ways to do things in Drupal. You have all these different tools. They've changed over the years, as we'll talk about when we go through the history. And so it can just be a challenge of knowing what's the best tool for you. And so what we're going to do in this session is attempt to present an honest comparison between one of the more popular modules in Drupal, Paragraphs, with over 100,000 sites, site usage in Drupal 8, against a relatively new challenger in Layout Builder. Layout Builder was not in the first initial release of Drupal core. It was added later, initially as an experimental module, but has become more stable over the last year. It's in Drupal 9. There's a lot of momentum behind it. And so we're going to compare it with Paragraphs in this session. Now, this session is for, Go Paragraphs. This session is for site builders who want to understand which tool is best for them, best for their organization, maybe best for their use case. And so the main learning objective here is really just learning the pros and cons of the approach between Layout Builder, which I said is a newer tool, between Paragraphs, which has been around a little bit longer, and just learning more about the history of site building tools. I thought a little bit about, doing like some how-to stuff, but there's just so much material already out there. There's plenty of guides and videos on how to configure Paragraphs or how to set up Layout Builder, that I really wanted to just give you a good overview just to help you decide what's the best tool for your project. So today's agenda, we'll talk a little bit about me, and then we're going to dive into the history of layout building in Drupal. We'll talk through the good and the bad of Paragraphs and what can be improved. We'll talk about the good and bad of Layout Builder and what can be improved. And then we're going to also look at a few other alternative tools, some of which are newer and kind of interesting and should be on your radar. And then we're going to summarize which tool, fits what use case, and we'll wrap it up with some Q&A. So my name is Jay Calicott. I'm the VP of Technical Operations for MediaCurrent. I've been working with Drupal for 14 years or so. Built a lot of Drupal sites over the years, started in Drupal 4.6. Really have enjoyed being a Drupal engineer. My hope is that my experience can help, guide you in your decision with this material. So I've spoken on all things Drupal and written about Drupal, and I'm just a generally passionate advocate for Drupal. All right. Okay, and I am representing MediaCurrent here. We are an open source expansion partner at MediaCurrent. We're Drupal pioneers, digital strategists, open source advocates, researchers, designers, and innovators who solve technology challenges. And our mission is to bring together the most talented team members to provide world-class solutions for the web. So to kick things off, let's take a look at the history of layout building in Drupal. These are some of the tools that stood out to me. If I left out any of your favorites, you can send me your hate mail. But these are the ones that I have experienced at some of the more popular projects, dating all the way back to, 2008, 2009 in some cases. And so we'll go through each one by one. All right, blocks. Everybody knows blocks. Blocks have been around forever, and the block admin page has been around forever. I've been using blocks for more than a decade. And using the block admin page was totally fine for a number of years. That's how I started building websites. So you'd have a 2-column layout. You'd have your theme regions, right? You'd have a left column and a right column. So you just place the blocks in either column. We used views a lot, views blocks. Other contributed modules would provide blocks. You could define your own in modules. And I'm showing a more recent screenshot, right? This is from Drupal 8, but the interface has changed over the years. But the overall workflow and concept hasn't changed too much from then, and it's totally fine. But what happened is as sites got more complex, on the next screen. So as sites got larger and more complex, the block admin page became kind of a mess. So tell me if you remember this, if you're an OG like me, you're working on sites, everything's going fine, but all of a sudden, like one layout for an entire site wasn't good enough. The homepage layout needed its own kind of different layout, right? And so we had limited tools, and so we'd have, we have our theme regions, and so you would just have to add more theme regions, and it kind of led to creating some one-off theme regions just for the homepage. And so, okay, fine, have some one-off regions. You can easily configure block visibility. And so you can make some blocks show up on the homepage, other blocks show up elsewhere. And you had your kind of two layouts, your back page layout and your homepage layout. And again, this, became a mess over time because you'd have way too many blocks. They'd all have like different visibility rules, and you really it was very limited, and you just had all this kind of bloat, and the UX became kind of a mess. So over the years, there's been many different alternative ways of laying things out on the page. So the next module I want to look at is the context module. And this was a great solution for organizing all these blocks, tagging them, creating rules. And it required some skill on the part of the developer to organize them effectively, but it gave you a tool to arrange these blocks in different ways. You could still have some theme region bloat because it didn't really solve that problem. So you still might have way too many regions, but it did help group them together. Now, one issue I really hated about it is you could have multiple active contexts at the same time. So you'd have one context that would trigger a block in the right sidebar, and then you'd have another one that enabled some additional blocks. And then when they were both active, they weren't in the order that you wanted them to be in, and you would try to reorder them and mess with the weights. So if any of you have worked with context before, you probably ran into this problem. It would make me crazy. But overall, good tool. Over still 155,000 sites using this. The vast majority are D7 sites. Another site building tool, Display Suite. Very similar to the core field layout module, which was added in Drupal 8 as an experimental module, but then it never actually made it to stable, so it got removed from Drupal 9. But it's basically the same thing as Display Suite. You can create layouts, and you can assign fields to different regions. You can place blocks on it. The UX is pretty good. And so, yeah, it's a pretty good solution. For a while, we had some internal debates, kind of mid D7 life cycle about, whether we should kind of go all in on Display Suite or panels. And we'll talk about panels next, but we kind of went the way of panels. But, it's a pretty solid tool. There's 152,000 sites using it, and still 30,000 of those are AAA. And then panels has been a long time favorite of mine. It's been one of the more like controversial modules in Drupal. I feel like people kind of love it or hate it, which is kind of funny. But we as an agency, we kind of really got into panels. The further along we went in Drupal 7, just because it was a really handy tool. It's very developer friendly. The UX isn't always great for like the end user, but it gave you control over layouts. I loved writing panel plugins. It was really simple. So a really solid tool. I remember, and it's been around for a long time. I remember 2010 San Francisco. I'm listening to Panel's presentation, and they showed the in-place editing feature, and that's analogous to what Layout Builder does now, which is you are able to instantly preview the panel pane that you're dropping on the page. And so really powerful tool, been around a long time, still 194,000 sites using it. So it's been a long time favorite of mine. And then towards the later years of Drupal 7, pre Drupal 8, Panoply got kind of popular and got some buzz. I really liked Panoply. It was all panels based. What's nice about this solution, this is a distribution, and I just liked some of the additional features that it added. It had a search feature and it had a WYSIWYG feature, and it just kind of pulled everything together for you. So it's a really solid tool. This is an example of what the panels in-place editing feature looks like. And so, really solid distribution. Over 3,000 sites still use it. So good solution there. Now, fast forward to today. How did we get to where paragraphs was so popular? So a lot of those tools were good in earlier versions of Drupal, but then the usage really fell off. So a lot of them popular in Drupal 7, but in Drupal 8, much less so. So things, paradigms shift, and tools that are popular in 7 aren't in 8. And so here we have the rise of paragraphs in Drupal 8. And something that I observed is, and maybe some of you had this same feeling, is as soon as Drupal 8 came out, there just wasn't a replacement or an upgrade for field collection. So field collection, very popular 7 module, and field collection is what everybody used to aggregate fields together. And here comes Drupal 8, it's stable and everything. Needs to aggregate fields, and yet there was no solution other than paragraphs, which had been around for a little while. But I think that helped really kind of increase the usage really quickly on paragraphs, because at a minimum, you could use it for field aggregation. But then so many of us, as we're starting to use this tool, are like, oh, wow, this is a lot more flexible than field collections. So instead of just being tied to one defined group of fields, enough where you define a bunch of different types, and you can use any one of these types or templates. And so just so flexible. And it also was around that time that component-driven design was picking up steam. And so it married really well with that, because you could map your little paragraph type and fields to a component. And so really solid solution. At Media Current, we use paragraphs a lot. And it's a great tool. Now, not all of it's good. And so we're going to talk about the good and the bad, okay? Just like with anything, there's some good and bad. First of all, talking about the good, it's structured. It's leveraging entities, right? This is a important concept in Drupal. Everything, nodes, taxonomy, they're all entities. Paragraphs is entities, field-based, all that good stuff. I like that the interface is consistent in that everything's on your entity edit page. So you edit a node, it's got paragraphs on it. It's one interface that's familiar, but you still have that flexibility to mix and match different paragraphs on the page. And then because it is structured and leverages entities, it's very API friendly. You turn on JSON API and all your structure's there. And then fields are translatable as well. There's some limitations around translation, but for the most part, you're in good shape there. Okay, so we talked about the good. What about the bad? So nesting is a problem. You can easily fall down a rabbit hole, or if you start nesting, or just at least create terrible UX. So what happens is that you're trying to, you're looking at design to trying to define a structure, and you find yourself needing to have multiple layers of paragraphs. So you have a paragraph, it has some fields on it, and then one of those fields is also a paragraph field, and then that paragraph has fields on it. And then you can just get into a real nesting problem where just from an editing experience and UX experience, it looks terrible. So that's an issue, and is kind of tied to the fact that there's some limitations around like laying things out. There's no layout controls. It's just you pick your paragraph type and it has fields on it. There's one of the complaints with paragraphs is just around revision bloat. Every time you save an entity that has paragraphs on it, it bumps up revisions. Now, this is nice because you can fully roll back to earlier versions of the page with the corresponding paragraph revisions, but it really increments your revisions. It can be dramatic on a large site. So there are some workarounds for this, but it's something to be aware of that you can run into revision bloat, which would affect your database size. Paragraphs also doesn't have an inline preview. I mentioned layout controls, and then some of the UX is limiting just out of the box. And again, there's some contrib solutions for this, but it is kind of limited in that regard. Okay, excuse me. Got a cough. Okay. All right. Making it better. So first of all, you can limit nesting. Now this, takes some skill, but if you're able to flatten out your paragraphs where you're really not going any deeper than like one level deep, then you're going to have a much better experience. Your end user is going to have a much better experience. And it's easier said than done, but you want to try your best to limit nesting. And we'll show some screenshots of some of the things I'm talking about here in a little bit. Another thing that I like that makes the UX better is the paragraphs browser module. There's a couple different modules you can add to make the experience of adding paragraph better. You can add icons and preview images and things like that. You can enable page preview on your node types so that at least you have that full page preview, even though it's not as nice as like an instant inline preview. And then regarding the revision bloat, I really like an auto clean module. And so most websites do not need an infinite amount of revisions, right? You can pair those back with node revision. It just does it on a schedule, really easy to configure. And so it's going to cap those revisions by length of time or whatever. And so that's going to prevent that revision bloat that you might otherwise get. Now, in terms of other improvements I'd like to see, so I'd love to see an off-canvas paragraph picker. Off-canvas is that slide out sidebar that pops up. I did notice recently that the paragraphs editor enhancements module has an option for an off-canvas version of its little pop-up. So I would like that's something to check out, but I really like that experience on like Acquia Cohesion. We'll look at that later. And then I really wish we had slide-in modals for all these nested screens. I'm going to show you a couple examples like what Contentful does, what Forestry does. It's a really nice pattern that I really wish paragraphs had and just Drupal in general had that would deal with some of the nesting issues. And then, if inline preview would also be nice if we could ever figure that out. So this is from the paragraphs homepage. It just gives you kind of an idea what they're trying to accomplish. So you've got a page, you break it up into chunks, into components. Paragraphs allows you to mix and match those components in any order. Here's an example of the Paragraphs browser. This is the configuration that we ship with Rain. And so we have a lot of different paragraphs defined, and we have preview images for everything and icons. And it's a little extra work, but it's not hard to set up, and it really makes the experience a lot better than just like an add button with a drop down. Makes it a lot more clear. Here's an example of nesting. This is just one level deep, but still doesn't look great because it just indents everything over. So you can see how you can easily lose track of what's going on as you're trying to fill out a node form if you keep like expanding and indenting over all these different fields. So this is a pattern I wish Drupal would adopt. Y'all can tell me if there's like some sort of contributed solution for this or an initiative. So here's an example for forestry. So instead of like trying to expand everything out on a single page, it does this nice little slide in kind of screen. Looks nice. Contentful, I think it looks a little bit better. So this is a demo I've done in Contentful on Gatsby. And you can build a similar content model to what you would do with Drupal and Paragraphs. But again, you see here, it's got that slide out screen. I would love for this to be something like that was in Drupal core, and it would be lovely for something like Paragraphs because it would dramatically improve that whole issue that you have with nesting. Okay, I see one person has issues with, okay, so one person having issues with screen freezing. Let me know if I'm going too fast or y'all see any sort of freezing issues, but we'll move on next to Layout Builder, right? This is the new challenger, wasn't in 8.0, but is now stable. It's in Drupal 9. There's a lot of momentum about it. We've probably seen a million different demos on it. We've seen Dries notes on it. So what's good and bad with Layout Builder? So first of all, the good, it's in core. That's great. The preview functionality is really good. You instantly see what it looks like. It's got layout UX, right? Paragraphs is sort of limited in that regard, but you're able to lay things out. Still translatable. You can still use paragraphs together. You're going to use them differently. In this case, you would probably just be using paragraphs on maybe your block types just for the field aggregation aspect of paragraphs. And so those are some of the good. Let's look at the bad. The inline blocks UX is a mess. We'll look at that here in a minute. The choose block UX is also kind of a mess out of the box. Again, there's solutions for this that make it better. But, you know, it's kind of goes with that out of box experience not being the greatest. I don't like that the layout stuff's on a separate tab. That's always bothered me. I wish they would merge that into the main kind of edit tab for an entity. Disconnects your content a little bit. This is an issue for me, just like you can embed blocks from around the site in your layout, but then like what the difference between paragraphs, everything like follows a hierarchy. It's all part of one big entity structure versus like Layout Builder kind of, you have different pieces together that are a little bit disconnected for me. Again, it may not be an issue for you, but it bothers me a little bit. And then it doesn't really fit. If you wanted to do a decoupled solution, it doesn't really fit that because you would lose that instant inline preview unless you were going to theme it twice, which you're not going to do. So it wouldn't really make sense for that. Now, in terms of making it better. Okay, so a couple things out of the box that bother me but are kind of quickly resolved by contributed modules is, first of all, the Layout Builder module, it will convert instead of doing an off-canvas little inline block UX, it does a pop-up, looks much better, can fit virtually any type of block type. That's fine. And then there's a couple modules that will allow you to filter down the different blocks that you would make visible to your like end user who might be placing blocks. Now, other improvements I'd like to see, just maybe better UX overall. It's still an evolving tool. again, the inline block UX needs to overhaul. And then I really wish we could move that stuff from the layout tab to the edit tab. That's my own opinion. So let's look at some screens, some stuff I was speaking to. So again, layout controls. It's really nice. You can define different layouts and select them here. This is where I start having some issue. Again, you have way too much stuff on here by default. You would never show all that stuff to like a client unless you wanted to really confuse them. And then the inline block UX, like I said, it's too squished. There's not enough room there. It just really shouldn't have ever been done that way. Like even with the default title body that you get with the like simplest block type, it's like there's not enough room in there. So again, these issues are easy to resolve. Here's another module that allows you to, configure what blocks and things would appear. So it's not a big deal to address that. So, okay, we've looked at paragraphs. We've looked at Layout Builder. Now there's some other interesting tools that should at least be on your radar and that I'd at least like to discuss briefly before we kind of do our final comparison. So one of them is, a very interesting product, right? Is Cohesion. Acquia talks about this a lot. Acquia acquired a company last year that built Cohesion, and the UX is really nice. So the thing I mentioned earlier, like I'd love this type of off-canvas picker for paragraphs. That'd be amazing. Again, maybe it's already in the module, that paragraphs editor enhancements module. Maybe it works just like this and it's great. So I like that a lot. They allow you to, they have a UX, like a kit that you can download that has a bunch of components that you can start with and modify. And then this is similar to that UX pattern that I mentioned earlier with Contentful. It looks a little bit different, but you can see that slide out screen from the right side. That's different, right? It's not using off canvas, or it's using, it's not using off canvas. It's a whole other overlaid screen that looks pretty nice. Overall, I think a good experience for your end user who can drop things on the page and arrange them and a layout and all that good stuff. You also have the ability to build all these components like in browser, which is kind of interesting. So it's a really nice tool. I mean, one of the downsides is just going to be that this is the product, right? If you're used to building everything with open source, you might be like, well, this is kind of a departure from that because, there's a pricing aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's a really nice tool. One other thing to mention about it is that, as far as I can tell, when you add all these different blocks to the layout area, it stores it in like a JSON object, which is kind of structured, but still a little bit messy. So, it's has all its little configuration stored in one big JSON object. It's something to be aware of. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not as nice as, the entity structure, right? So that's Cohesion. And then the next few tools are a little bit similar and follow patterns that you often find in like the WordPress space, right? So the first tool I want to look at is Gutenberg. So this is a Gutenberg Drupal integration, and you've probably heard of Gutenberg with WordPress, right? And so there's like a port to Drupal. There's a company that's built a whole like product service around it. And this is a pattern where it's like you're doing a bunch of stuff. You're doing kind of like layouty type of stuff, drag and dropping of components all within like one big WYSIWYG box, which, to an average user is probably, a better experience than some of the things that you would get with some of the screens you might see in Drupal. So pretty intuitive experience. Many of you have probably seen Hacks, because they're some of the Penn State folks are behind the Hacks editor and have presented at DrupalCons in years past. And similar concept again. So theirs is like very web component heavy. Pretty neat tool. Again, it's like you're doing stuff in WYSIWYG and you have this nice interface for like selecting different components that you can drag onto the page. And then one more I wanted to show. This is one that I've seen more recently. This is a newer like product. This is another like product you'd have to pay for, but this is called DXPR. And again, it's like WYSIWYG, you have this nice picker. And so all of these like do similar things, just with their own like tool set, their own like little dialogues and everything. So all of this I think is nice in one respect. It is a departure from what we're used to in Drupal in this regard. So, WordPress has a long history of, they've got a body field. They've had a lot of different layout builder tools over the years. Gutenberg had a lot of buzz last year, but they have other tools that are similar. But they all end up adding all these different short codes to the body field. And that's just kind of how WordPress does stuff, right? They're tokenized, they're little tokens in the body field or whatever. And so these, I would presume, follow that same type of pattern. As far as I can tell, they do, right? Is they have some sort of tokens that all get kind of jammed together in sort of an unstructured way, right? It's not that it's bad or anything. And if it gets the job done, then great. It's a departure from what has long been a differentiator for Drupal, especially in the early days when there just weren't as many CMSs that had as much like content modeling power as Drupal. So it's a departure from that, right? Everything's kind of mashed together tokens. And so my big concern with that is just like, what's your exit strategy? If you use one of these tools, and you want to get your content out of it at some point, are you starting over? It's like, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I could see where it's an issue where all your content is like tokenized content. And you're like, okay, let's migrate to something else. It's going to be like, how do you get all that content out without just like creating a huge problem for yourself? So that's my one concern with those tools that follow that type of paradigm. Alrighty, y'all. So we've looked at the history of Drupal site building. We've talked about pros and cons of Layout Builder, pros and cons of paragraphs, some improvements I'd like to see. And we looked at some newer tools. Let's kind of summarize and see what tool would be best for you, right? And best for your project. So the case for paragraphs, I think when layouts are pretty straightforward, it's a good fit. If the inline preview isn't a deal breaker, it's a good fit. You can still do preview stuff, just not that instant inline preview. And then I think it really fits decoupled well. I mean, if you're going to do a React front end, I just think that's much better fit. I'm just not even sure how or why you would mess with Layout Builder if you're going to do like decoupled stuff. The other thing is, if you're really building something that needs to be omni-channel, so you're trying to build one kind of content model that can handle, Alexa and use all, mobile apps and digital signage and all this stuff, and that would maybe push you in the direction of having a much, more structured content model. So that's the case for paragraphs. And even those reasons aside, I mean, at the end of the day, some of you will just go with whatever you prefer, right? You might just like one UX better than the other. And that's okay, that's fine. If you like paragraphs better just because you like the experience and the whatever better, maybe you just prefer Layout Builder in those controls that you have. So Layout Builder is obviously a great when you want that control over the layouts, right? You've got a customer, they want to physically, they want total control, being able to lay things out on the page. They want that instant preview as soon as they drop it onto the page. So when that's critical for the success of the project, well, that's going to push you in the Layout Builder direction. And then one other thing to consider. So if you're kind of on the fence a little bit, you're doing some discovery around it, and you're like trying to think of, okay, how would I represent these designs and everything? If you're seeing that to try to do it in paragraphs, it's going to lead you to all this nesting stuff, then that's probably, again, an indication maybe you should go in the layout builder direction. If you're able to accomplish the same kind of layouts in a much more straightforward fashion using layout builder, then that's what you should go with. So again, at the end of the day, you decide the winner. I like both solutions. I can see cases for why you would use either in some circumstances, or why some of you would just go all layout builder or all paragraphs. I think these tools are going to stick around for Drupal 9. And so I think you can't really go wrong. Now, I'm going to do my best. I've seen a lot of chatter in the chat box. I think we've got a moderator, so I'm going to try my best to address any sort of questions you have in our limited time here. If you're not watching the live stream, you can get a hold of me on Twitter pretty easily. Also, Media Current, you can contact us on our website if you want to talk to us. And then just super briefly, please take a moment after the session to participate in the survey. I'll tell you, I've spoken at DrupalCon over the years. Very few people tend to fill out the survey, so you'll have 200 people sitting in the audience and then get 2 responses, one that says they hate it and one that says they love it. And that's not a really that's not really helpful for our speakers to have that kind of feedback. So please, I encourage you, whether you love it, hate it, whatever, fill out that survey. Okay, and so that is my session finished before time is up, so that's good. I had to rush a little bit, but I will do my best. Yeah, for slides, give me a little while. I'll probably have to clean it up a little bit, but they're in Google Slides, so I can publish those out. But I'm gonna probably do that on my Twitter account, so I'll do my best to put that out here soon, the next day or so. So yeah, slides. And let me see. Okay, moderation panel. I don't know how Q&A goes with this. I don't know if I'm supposed to click on anything, or if somebody's going to just tell me what the questions are. Okay, seeing some questions here. Okay, a question from Renato G. Okay, so you're just supposed to scroll back up. Okay, that's going to be awesome. So, and some may want to repeat their questions just so I see them, but I'll do my best to go back scroll here. I got about 6 minutes. So in the future, in your opinion, the tendency will be to use Layout Builder and stop using paragraphs? Ooh, that's a great question. So one thing, I feel like there's a collision course between inline blocks and paragraphs. They're sort of the same concept. And so I kind of wish that they would just kind of merge together as one thing. So I could see, I haven't seen people talking about it, but like I'm thinking, well, paragraphs and inline blocks, why not could paragraphs just kind of merge into inline blocks? So as far as the future, I really have no idea. I mean, what Layout Builder has going for it, obviously, is that it's in core. So I would think that it's going to stick around. And then as far as paragraphs, maybe not, maybe so. Who knows? So what paragraphs has going for it is that it's already, Drupal 9 compatible, basically. So what you would see in previous versions of Drupal is that there would be a drop-off, because you would have a tool that maybe was good in 7 but didn't fit the new paradigm as well in the next version of Drupal, because Drupal would change so dramatically. And so if there wasn't a lot of momentum to upgrade it and keep it stable, then it would just kind of fall off in usage. Versus with paragraphs, I don't think that'll happen in Drupal 9. So yeah, as far as the future, I mean, I have no idea. And there's all these new tools coming down. So maybe there'll just be a more compelling tool that comes down the road. But for now, I really like it. We do a lot of decoupled stuff, and so it fits that pattern really well. So yeah, but I like both solutions, honestly. Okay, so multilingual. So again, my experience with Layout Builder is limited because it's a lot newer, but it is, you know, multilingual, like compatible. I have a lot more experience with paragraphs. The one issue with paragraphs is that the paragraph itself isn't translatable, which is kind of confusing. But for all intents and purposes, it does well. You can localize all your fields. We have worked on big, you know, multilingual sites and use paragraphs just fine. So it does well with translation. So okay, man, there's lots of questions. Okay. I'm gonna go kind of in the order that I see them. So let's go with Himanshu Sharma. Which could be a better option to expose layout as a service? Is paragraphs more flexible? Not sure I completely understand that. Like, yeah, I'd probably need some clarification on that question. If you could clarify that one a little bit, I'm going to move on to the next question. How does LB resonate with structured content? I haven't looked super deeply into how LB structures its content like in the database or whatever, but I think it's, you know, still pretty structured. You know, how easily does Layout Builder content work with Apache Solar? How easily does Layout Builder? I guess so. Some of these, it's going to be hard. I can't do like easy follow-ups with people in chat. It's hard to get follow-up on this because some of these I need a little bit of clarification. I'm not sure. Easily does Layout Builder? Okay. Thanks, Tom. All right, we've got a few more minutes. Again, we're also going to hop on over, if we get kicked out of here, we're going to hop on over to the Media Current booth, and we can do more chat there for if I leave out some of these questions. And also for the Media Current folk, I don't know if we need to like, if y'all could like copy some of those questions and paste them over so like we don't lose track of them. All right, so probably got answer for, or got time for maybe one more question before we got to hop off. Any hope for improvements that will make Layout Builder more decoupled compatible? I mean, wouldn't surprise me if people have done some cool stuff with it. I just, again, I'm not sure how you would really do that. It seems like you'd have to really hack at it to make that work, and maybe be more trouble than it's worth, because you're not going to theme it twice. You don't want to have to theme it in Drupal just for the sake of having that preview and then have to theme it elsewhere. That wouldn't make sense. So you'd have to, like, if you have like some sort of React front end, maybe you could integrate it in some way or another. It seems like it'd be super hacky. So again, people come up with cool solutions all the time. For me right now, it doesn't really make that much sense. So so it doesn't seem like a good fit. I mean, even though you could export, you know, the layout in some way and the data to a decoupled front end, it kind of takes away from the whole experience of being able to have that instant preview in the layout. And so it's like, it feels like it's technically possible. I just don't know if the experience, the end-to-end experience makes as much sense. Okay, let's see. I don't know. Someone can tell me if like we get kicked out of this room when the official time's over. That's something I don't know. All right, let me try to tackle another questions because 6 p.m. Okay, so we'll just try to stay in here. If we're not going to get kicked out, maybe we just keep our own space for a little while. Okay, great. Thank y'all. Let me try to tackle some more questions in. Does Layout Builder allow for alternative layouts for responsive theming? I mean, I think when you define layouts, I mean, it's kind of up to you to make them responsive, but I'm not sure exactly what that means. But I mean, the idea for sure is that any layouts that you're applying to your in Layout Builder you're going to want to theme responsively. Okay, do you have experience with layout builder plus blocks plus search indexing without using the rendered content option of? Oh, that's a good question about, yeah. So I like the rendered content option in Search API because what that, and I mean, I think it's going to fit for layout builder. So the quick answer is no, I don't have experience without using rendered content. But what rendered content does in Search API is it will search against like the fully rendered, chunk of content, which, isn't as ideal as it being able to search like each individual field and understand what type each field is. But, for all intents and purposes, it works pretty well. So, okay. Another question. Can we use a combination of paragraph plus LB, paragraph for flat searchable content, and layout builder only to drag and drop? I mean, so I don't know if this will answer it exactly, but I have played around with some different layout builder paragraph integrations just because I've been curious to see what you could do. And you can kind of use them together. There's a module, I don't recall what it is, but where you can, so when you have like a repeatable paragraph field, like each row is like has its own delta, its own number. So with that module, I forget what it's called, paragraphs layout builder or something, but you're able to then go on the layout builder side and assign each paragraph. So each row that you placed a paragraph, you're able to place that in your layout builder, layout, which is pretty neat. And again, I haven't used it on a production website or anything, but there are some interesting integrations. I don't know if I'd feel super comfortable with, any of them. Like, feels like it's getting a little bit, hacky if you're using kind of a module that's a cool proof of concept, but maybe doesn't have, a lot of site usage. So that's something to consider. But I mean, there are ways you could mesh the two together. Okay. This is fun. I've never been part of a big chat thing before. Okay. Trying to find some more questions I haven't seen yet. Let's see. Might need y'all to repeat. Huh. I don't know if KB's asking. Okay. So from earlier, are you or audience aware of any viable JSON-powered front-end editing options yet? That's it. Interesting question. Is the idea? I don't know if I'm understanding the question correctly, but I don't know if the question is just, could you expose some sort of layout over JSON API? Which may be the question. Like, I think Layout Builder has some sort of JSON API, integration or whatever. Like, because I've looked and there's at least like patches and things. I don't know if there's like a stable, way to expose your layouts over JSON API. But again, my issue has just been like, it wouldn't really make sense since you want that inline preview working. So let's see. Yeah, seeing lots of multilingual stuff. Okay, I'm seeing a couple more modules or a couple of more questions. Question. No mention of 4Kitchens module emulsified. Drupal only discovered it in March and haven't tried it yet. Seems like I have seen that before. You're right. I don't know that much about it, honestly. So I will check that out. I know I've seen it before and looked at it, and I've already forgotten what it does. But so Doug Van was saying that it seems like the 4Kitchens emulsify Drupal does fits somewhere above Gutenberg and Hacks. So definitely worth checking out. And then Jessica Stratman said, what about an accordion paragraph type? We've needed a nested paragraph type for that. Yeah, so we have the same thing. So like in our RAN distribution, we've got, an accordion paragraph that has a subtype. And so again, it's one layer of nesting. It's okay. It's hard to accomplish that type of thing without at least one level of nesting. Okay. All right, so maybe kind of caught up on Q&A. Okay, let's see another question. More of a general question, so I think the question is, how is nested terrible in paragraphs? Okay, so I already mentioned about the accordion thing. So to me, the nesting's acceptable when it's one layer deep, but I've seen where it's gone like 3 or 4 levels deep and it just gets crazy. It's just like, it's not usable. And so that's an issue where developers are building it the way they think they need to build it. The way they think they need to build it to accomplish the thing that they need to accomplish, which is usually just like, how do I get this thing to show up on the page in the component? And that's fine, but then a human being is actually going to need to like edit this page later, and you need to give them a UX that makes sense. So if you layer it multiple, over one level, it just becomes like unusable pretty quickly. Yeah, that's fine, Jessica. Okay. Rebecca says, oh, cool. Thank you, Doug. And then Rebecca's question, do you know if there's any initiative to place the layout info under the edit tab? So, and this goes back to my opinion. It's fine if like some of you may just disagree with it. My issue over the years, and I didn't get into this in the presentation, but I've often fell into the trap of giving the end user like too many interfaces, because I would try to find the right tool for the job. It'd be like, okay, well, we need node queued for this. So we'd have node queue for like curated list of stuff. And it's like, okay. And then we use blocks for some things, or we use panels for some things, and we use context for some things. And so we might have a site. This was a long time ago before I kind of learned my lessons from it. But I would mix and match all these different tools. Again, just thinking about it from a developer's perspective of how do I accomplish the thing that they're asking me to do. And, we would get it done, but then it would be hard to maintain. And we would train the client on it. It's like, here's 6 different interfaces you need to manage your site. And like, that's a total mess. I don't want to do that. So I want things to be straightforward. I want to train them on like one interface, if at all possible, or maybe the most 2. I just don't like presenting different interfaces to them. So they're going to have to know how to manage, the standard like Drupal node edit interface and edit taxonomy and menus, but those aren't too bad. They're pretty straightforward. But then it's like, okay, well, now you also have to go to this layout tab. I just wish it was on the same page. It makes sense to me. I don't like saying, okay, well, to accomplish this homepage, you got to edit these fields, but then you also have to hop on over to this other tab where the fields, you don't get to see them anymore, what the values in them, and then you got to like drop stuff onto the page. And again, it's fine. I mean, people still like it. It's just kind of my preference would be to have like this more unified interface, if at all possible. I mean, like you saw the Aqua Cohesion tool, like they figured out how to just have the layout stuff on the same page. So to me, it seems like it's possible. KB, so many node queues. I mean, and I didn't mention that in my presentation, but paragraphs, is able to eliminate the need for note queues in a lot of cases because you have a way of like queuing things in a certain order. So it's good for curated content. Alrighty. Lots of back scroll today. I see another question. Okay, another Jessica question. Are folks using private content with Layout Builder? Interesting. Seems like you could. You can have access control around it, I would think. Not searchable. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Well, so again, this is hard without a threaded chat. Yeah, I don't fully understand. Maybe you could clarify your question a little bit, Jessica, because I'm not sure I'm following. This is fun. This is definitely a different DrupalCon experience doing a video and chat. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. So I think we can wrap up Q&A here. I think we got through most of the questions. Probably, people are starting to drop off and everything. If you have some burning questions, hop on over to the Media Current booth, and it'll probably be easier to answer them there. Okay, appreciate it. Thanks, y'all.